Hello, my name is Chris Miller with Applied Information Sciences. I'm presenting this afternoon on SharePoint 2013, in particular the platform enhancements contained in this most recent release that are the most impactful and for me represent game changers. So who am I? Again, my name is Chris Miller. I'm actually a practice manager with AIS. I'm responsible for our civilian side of the public sector. In particular, right now, I'm actively engaged in the Department of Treasury, Department of Justice, and the Department of Veterans Affairs, as well as some other smaller initiatives with Department of Commerce and some other non-for-profit organizations. So the topics I'm going to be covering during this presentation are the 5 critical game changers within the SharePoint 2013 platform. You know, as an IT manager who's responsible for the software side, my emphasis tends to be on the so what factor. So in many of these, as we discuss these, I'll be asking a simple question, which is so what? So things like institution of HTML5 and the flexibility of the platform now. For the business owners and the end users, the question is the so what? The technologists tend to focus too much on the actual change and less on what the impacts are. So again, the 5 key areas that we're going to be going through today are the productivity enhancements, and this is a list of 10 or so of those key changes within the UI, within the general platform that really improve and have a very immediate impact to end users. The next one is workflows. And at AIS, we spend a lot of time in workflows, both in the SharePoint 2007 as well as 2010, designing workflows to facilitate business practices using composite applications to tie together SharePoint out-of-the-box components to satisfy business needs. Huge part of what we do is workflows. The third one I think is really useful. We encounter a lot of access databases out there. So the institution of access services and how that can be utilized in 2013 has come a long way, and I think this really does expand the capabilities of a wider audience and will increase adoption of the platform. The fourth one is business intelligence, and in particular PowerView. We'll go through what that looks like and what are the impacts to business users. And last but not least is eDiscovery. In my opinion, we'll kind of go over this a little bit deeper, is that no other area in SharePoint 2013 is the requirements been so targeted as they are in eDiscovery. All of these collectively, in my opinion, represent a true motivating factor or true driver to change. Okay, so starting off with productivity enhancements. I'm not a big social networking guy. This picture was recommended by my 7-year-old who suggested that the internet is comprised of cats. So I thought that it was a good one to add for this particular section. But what we're kind of be covering are some of those changes to the UI, changes to the overall structure that really have an impact to productivity. So in 2013, the Microsoft development stack or development team placed an emphasis on responding to user feedback, and there was some general comments and considerations relative to what would be considered normal day-to-day activities or normal actions, uploading files, moving locations, permissions, and who has rights to what. So in addition to that, there were some changes to the flexibility of the platform and how now we've transitioned less into the development and coding world, and we're greater empowering those business owners of the overall system. So in my simplified world, I have essentially 3 groups of people. So I've, again, kind of in a simplified manner, categorized the workforce into 3 general groups. First is the business owners, and these are the folks that are responsible, or the key stakeholders, right? These are the guys that pay for the new development, pay for the solutions overall, and are analyzing or making decisions. The workforce of those that are impacted in day-to-day operations in the public sector, these would be the folks that are responsible for completing forms or processing forms, identifying and working through new policy documents. This is your workforce. This is the productivity group. The third group represents the support arm, and that is your developers and support. This would be IT in any capacity, right? Development, infrastructure support services. So the targets of the enhancements in 2013 are all encompassing. They're aimed at basically all of these user groups. And I'm going to kind of reference these three as we go through each of these new productivity enhancements. The first one, and you're going to find out quickly that this is probably my favorite change in the new platform, is drag and drop. So the feedback received by the Microsoft development staff that managing files was cumbersome, and we see this in the field. When we're supporting our customers in the public sector, there's a lot of data out there. There's a lot of files that have to be moved from one location to another. Oftentimes we're transitioning off of network shares, working towards more of an enterprise support process within SharePoint. So getting the information into SharePoint is a key critical first step. So this drag and drop, and you see a little screen capture here down at the bottom, represents that area where we're able to actually drag files into play. Second thing is sharing, and again, targeted at the workforce. The current SharePoint 2010 platform provides a lot of information about where files and folders and document libraries are shared to, but it's oftentimes very difficult to determine or get to that point. There's often 3 clicks away, and many of the users we deal with in the field, a typical question is asked is, what exactly am I letting people do? And so it isn't intuitive to users exactly what is being shared and what isn't. So the new interface is very much focused on making and simplifying the sharing process. And you see a couple of screen captures down here below where I can quickly identify who I'm sharing with. I have a link at the top across the top of the screen that allows me to directly access my sharing permissions. In addition to that, I can share team sites and provide explicit permissions to that area, as you see with the setting aside the team site members who can do what to the site itself. The next section is the following. There has been an enormous emphasis placed on my sites, and again, this started within 2010, but I think they've really realized the vision in 2013. In particular, alerts and notifications. At AIS, we spent a lot of time aggregating notifications and alerts into an aggregated place. So we'll centralize multiple applications or site collections, and this has been done for us now, and it's referred to as the following. It's a section within the My Sites, and you can see in the screenshot on the right that I am currently following 2 people and 4 sites, but you're also offered documents as well as tags. Next key change for the workforce is task aggregation. As I mentioned, we spend a lot of time aggregating content across disparate sites, site collections, and applications. This is an enormous tool set for us, or capability within the new platform. Allows us to aggregate content directly out of the box. It can sync up tasks with Outlook, and this does out of the box what we have been doing in custom code and composite application development for the better part of 3 years. So again, a great capability here and very impactful. So moving into development in the SharePoint 2013 platform, again, great shifts here. The feedback was that SharePoint development is very specialized, and as a practice manager, I'm painfully aware of the fact of how difficult it is to find very talented SharePoint developers. So the flexibility here to reach out to other technology sets and other experiences and have that be applicable to SharePoint-based development is huge. It's a big step forward for us, providing greater flexibility in how we resource our projects. Additionally, this was previously done exclusively in the Microsoft development stack. Now we are able to capitalize on more standards-based approaches like CSS. The flexibility the HTML5 provides for a front-end development really gives us a greater flexibility. Again, along the developer support front, we were very much limited on the number of tools and available samples to us. With the new capabilities built into Visual Studio, we now have a richer library of different tools and samples to call upon to create SharePoint-based and Office apps within the framework. Okay, still on the developer front, the flexibility for devices. We have been getting an increasing number of requirements in the federal sector as well as in our commercial practice for mobile application development. The feedback from previous mobile releases of SharePoint within 2010 was the limitations of the UI. And the current mobile support solution does not play out well for those users that are authenticated versus an unauthenticated access point. The workarounds to get into that were really limiting in terms of what the mobile display could be and not very flexible. So in this implementation in 2013, there was a greater emphasis on device flexibility, iPads, different mobile devices. So this is now done through something called device channels, where we can associate different master pages for different devices. And this is done at the on-load event or the on-pre-int event within the actual page load. The significance of that is that it chooses the application or chooses the appropriate device on load. So the pre-init, inet method of the publishing layout page class is when that is rendered. And again, that gives us greater flexibility. It happens early in the cycle, and it allows the right master page to be applied versus logic embedded deep in the process. On the developer support front, but this one is also applicable to the business owner, there's a much simplified, I guess, process for site branding. We now have Design Manager within SharePoint 2013 that provides more of a wizard-driven process for updating the design of the page, and this lends to greater flexibility in branding. This is important for us on the federal sector because we spend a lot of time customizing and tailoring front ends to particular departments or agencies or subgroups within the departments. Just as a quick example, within the Department of Treasury, there are 12 bureaus and 63 departmental offices or subgroups. And in some capacity, each one of those groups likes some level of personalization. So to be able to provide that quickly is an enormous cost savings. And again, still moving towards empowering the business, now moving on to empowering the business owners. One of the key new additions is the managed navigation. So previously, navigation was very rigid and difficult in structuring. And wasn't easily modified after being deployed. The advent of managed metadata, and in particular utilizing managed metadata for dynamic navigation structure. And you see a screenshot on the right here where I'm actually creating a football navigation page, and I can associate managed metadata tags to that team-driven page. In addition to that, I can now provide simplified URLs, which you see there on the right side, with the configure-friendly URL to this term. And back to my favorite topic, once I've created that link, I can now drag and drop links to the top navigational structure. The net result of this, or the so what factor in this, is that business owners now can create logical, dynamic navigational elements that can, again, more empower their user base and provide quicker access to information. Back to the Design Manager, as I mentioned, for the developers, this provides quick site branding, but this also empowers business owners to do the same. So now we can customize, customizations can be performed without requirement of coding, and can be done with basic general user capabilities. This is a big process for empowering business users, and if you see on the right there, or at the bottom, the 1 through 8 steps represents the wizard-driven process for the Design Manager of editing master pages. Alright, so here's my Dave Letterman slide, my top 10 list. So the top 10 coolest productivity enhancements. The first one is the mobile development support. The number 9, managed metadata navigation, the powerful tool for empowering business users to really structure and organize their content. More tools in Visual Studio, more templates. The simple URLs, being able to quickly add football or a direct link to my content. If anybody's ever sent a SharePoint link via email with the %20 or the underscores or the complicated URL string. This is a much easier way of getting content out. The overall mobile device support, in particular how we're able to do device channels. The design manager, the so what factor for the business owner, as well as simplifying the branding for the developers and support staff. The following, being able to follow what each what each site, document, or user are doing, aggregating that across site collections. Number 3, better sharing. So now I'm able to quickly determine who has shared what, and what information I have shared out. Number 2 is task aggregation. Remember, we've done this so many times repeatedly in terms of aggregating assignments across web applications or site collections. The capability to do this directly out of the box using the My Sites page is an enormous shift in improving the capabilities of the system and bringing that information forward so users can act on. And then again, my absolute favorite this time around, and you'll see it throughout the 2013 environment, is the implementation of drag and drop. Okay, so the so what factor. So we've talked through all of the different impacts. The key things that I would like to bring your attention to is the improved time to market for the business owners so they can quickly get solutions deployed, new navigational structures, get content up for projects, and new things that have to be put at a head. Additionally, being able to increase this area of increase the scope and depth and breadth of content is ultimately leading towards an increase of knowledge base, right? So this whole process is creating the ability to better capture tacit knowledge, and as we're doing that, especially in the midst of a human capital crisis where we have a retiring workforce, this is a powerful way to quickly capture knowledge. Which kind of is a good segue into the workforce. Again, what we're doing is we're capitalizing on that knowledge. So the ability for the workforce to act on this information, to be able to search on it, quickly get to it, to navigate through dynamic navigations, is ultimately going to improve our job satisfaction and better empower our users. For the developers, it's pretty clear. We have greater platform flexibility. As we get more and more requirements for mobile device, we have a good platform to support that. And more enriched tool sets. So the next segment is on workflows, and in particular the decoupled workflow and the new additions to the SharePoint Designer relative to workflows. You see across the top a screen capture of the 19 new workflow elements contained in the new workflow engine. So we'll talk quickly about what the new capabilities are and why this is what I would refer to as a game changer. So this is one of the key things we do as an organization, is to sit down and, especially the softer side of the IT group, spending a lot of time performing Lean Six Sigma analysis, requirements analysis to determine how to re-engineer business processes to make them more efficient. So we capitalize on this technology, or this grouping of technology, quite a bit. And we utilize these hosted workflows and orchestrate business problems and use this for business process automation. So the next slide is a screen capture of SharePoint Designer within the new 2013 framework. And this is an area where we're able to bring in these new workflow designs and react quickly and assign tasks and assignments to these. With many of the experiences we have are with a large volume of workflow objects within some of our customers. We have hundreds of different workflows supporting thousands of instances of these workflows at any one time. The capability to do this type of development around this provides greater flexibility and sustainability of the platform, reducing maintenance costs. Each one of those custom 100 workflows that we had previously that were written in Visual Studio and code, if those had to be modified, the maintenance costs of that can be quite costly. So providing the flexibility to adjust through a designer like this and utilize these variety of different workflows is extremely powerful. So So what's changed in SharePoint 2013? Well, again, there's 19 new SharePoint workflow action steps, and the emphasis is reduction in the amount of custom code that will be written. From the performance side of the house, they decoupled the workflow from the SharePoint farm, and what that does for us when we start processing thousands of different workflow instances is that we're offsetting that liability relative to the performance of the environment. The other key step is the Visual Studio XAML output. So in this situation, we're able to develop XAML-based code within Visual Studio, export that into SharePoint Designer, and capitalize on the visual aspects of the workflow while capitalizing on custom developed code. So the SharePoint 2013 workflow is rooted in Windows Workflow 4.0. There's several key benefits to that, including integration with WCF and greater testability, as well as throttle settings. So now we're able to control that volume, and we've encountered this in several of our customers in terms of those high volume, high transactional systems. The ability to throttle those out and put those out over time has a huge emphasis on processing at a good rate. So some of the mechanics of the 2013 workflow. If you had a 2010 environment with workflows in place, there's no need to panic in terms of the transitions here. That's still supported as you go forward. In fact, if you do not install Workflow Manager 1.0 on your SharePoint farm, you will in fact be running SharePoint 2010 workflows. It is required, Workflow Manager 1.0 is required to institute the new 2013 platform. Some of the key benefits of the Workflow Manager are that you're able to provide fully declarative authoring, as well as the tracking and monitoring of workflows, and in particular provide an activity and workflow artifact management, so we're able to manage the processes as they come through. Next slide you see is the 2013 Workflow 4.0 Windows Workflow 4.0 architecture within SharePoint 2013. In particular, draw your attention to the right side where you see the Azure Workflow Box and the Azure Service Bus. In that image, we're actually hosting our workflow processes off of the farm. So the workflow, the metadata associated with the workflows and the scope are still within the SharePoint content database, but the actual processing of the workflow takes place off of that server environment. That dramatically improves performance of the system to a factor of 10 to 100 times improvement on performance of the workflows. Next key game changer is business intelligence and executive dashboards. So I have spent a fair amount of time working at several public sector agencies, and what I have learned in the federal government is that business intelligence and dashboards are very important things. So being able to surface actionable data to business owners and decision makers is something that we do with a lot of frequency. I mean, this is something that just about every one of our customers has a desire for a good splash page with good rich content that they can act on. So within the Microsoft solution or the Microsoft BI strategy, there are basically three key elements. The first one is Excel services. So within the 2013 framework, Excel services is a shared service that allows you to publish 2013 workbooks onto the SharePoint server. The second key element is PowerPivot, and for those that haven't seen PowerPivot or utilized a pivot table, PowerPivot allows me to bring in external data sources and pull that data together so that I can create pivot tables and drill down and do essentially data mining across disparate data sources. The last bit is PowerView, and again, this third element of the BI strategy provides for greater visualizations within SharePoint utilizing Excel services to really render sophisticated charts and maps. The key technology here is Silverlight. The rendering is quite sharp. The next screen kind of goes through the elements of the architecture. Going across the top of the web front end, you'll see the RESTful API where you can perform your basic CRUD functions, create, read, update, and delete. And this provides you your general interface to SharePoint 2013. The next is Excel Web Services, where you're able to actually communicate back and forth data service to the app server. Excel Web Accesses represents the web parts. The EWA is the form part of the Excel Web front end. It allows the .NET framework to hook into Windows SharePoint services. The fourth section is your JavaScript, or ECMA standards JavaScript. Middle section represents your app server, and in particular, draw your attention to the user-defined functions in the Excel services. This is where we load workbooks, we calculate them, and call on the custom code or user-defined functions, and refresh that external content. And then that's the segue to the bottom section, which is your content databases and or your external data sources, which are rendered through the Excel calculation services. Next slide is a screenshot of PowerPivot. As I mentioned, this is the way to get external data in and pull data across the enterprise. A little screen capture of get external data. Next screenshot is the PowerView within SharePoint 2013. You see I'm logged into the SharePoint environment. I've clicked on a Excel report or Excel services report. It renders back the PowerPivot or PowerView display. The thing I'll draw your attention to while we're on this screen is the ability to export this information directly to PowerPoint. As a project manager, this is a critical value add to me personally. The ability to render this content within the stream, manipulate and change the structure of the report, and then to export that directly into a PowerPoint slide is an enormous time saver. So this is a very powerful tool set for building actionable data and rendering good business intelligence reporting. Within the 2013 framework, you're provided with a site collection for the BI Center. So when I generate the BI Center, it generates a site that allows me to explore and analyze my data and put the different reports into and generate dashboards within. And again, back to our drag and drop capabilities. Here I am dragging an Excel report or dashboard into the dashboard section of my BI Center. So using the BI Center, I'll show you a couple of screen captures of one of our demo sites with business intelligence. The key takeaway from these slides is that this was rendered without any coding. So for business owners, this is a huge capability that you're provided using Excel, which a lot of folks are very familiar with. You're able to render good, rich content like this and then publish this information for consumption by a much wider audience. This is using the retail store locations, utilizing mapping controls, where you're able to provide more or less a bubble chart in terms of the value add detail below. In this next couple of slides, we're drilling down to performance and forecasting across a series of different technologies and product offerings. And a good screenshot of international product sales with bubble chart across time. This is a picture of a sales channel, and again, the purpose for showing these is to show the capabilities of the interface. These were all generated without development. So moving on to access services. Many years ago, I was supporting a organization, and that organization was a non-for-profit organization, and I happened upon a meeting in which the IT group was angrily discussing with one of the stakeholders how she had developed a access database to support over 2 million in donations, and how frustrated the IT staff was that she had put all this information and capture all this information into such a lightweight and unsecure environment. And at the time, I did not. Well, I guess I still look back on this and regret not defending the young lady in terms of what she had developed, because the ability to navigate that bureaucratic process and actually generate a solution that has that type of impact without the IT budget and without the capabilities and tools and development is quite impressive. And the fact that it had reached a point where so many users were capitalizing on it should have been embraced by the IT staff, and they should have provided the capabilities for that woman and that group to continue to utilize the solution. So I bring that up because I believe that Access has a little bit of a stigma, and unfortunately it's quite widely used within many groups and within the public sector. So Access itself has been around since 1992. Previously, today actually over 500 million people worldwide use Microsoft Office, so presumably all of those have Access capabilities on their desktops. With SharePoint 2013, there has been an adoption of Access as generating more of a web application capability. Previously, that process was challenging. You could import could import Access databases into SharePoint, and they would be dropped in as SharePoint-based lists. But now, within 2013, the data itself is actually stored in SQL Server. There's a much more sophisticated UI and a much easier to use interface that is generated for you out of the box. The key point here again is that there's no developers to write this. So in the scenario I gave where a non-for-profit organization was able to achieve that, this is a situation where they could not only achieve that but do that in a sustainable and scalable manner without having or requiring a significant IT organization investment. So for those that are familiar with the Anderson long tail, I think this is a great demonstration, a great scenario that plays into the long tail. So the theory of the long tail is that as our culture becomes, and continues to shift away from a relatively small number of applications and things to a much wider and larger number of items and mainstream products, at the very end of that, or at the far right, is a huge number of niche capabilities. And I think that's a great example of Access databases, like our donor database, right? This is someone who is tracking what originally was a handful of folks into this database, and the numbers kept going. This is a very niche requirement, a good representation of the far right of the tail, which I think Access falls into. So what I'm trying to showcase in this particular slide is that we're going to see a lot more of these and a lot more Access databases that are created. Some of them are more legacy, but the point being is that there's a significant number of those out on the far end of Anderson's tail. So the next few slides I'm going to show you a kind of a notional concept of how you transition those Access 2007 databases those Access databases into the SharePoint 2013 platform. In this particular example, this is an Access 2007 database. We're able to save that information off. Within Access 2013, you can now create an Access database and then create a custom web application from that Access database. So in this example, or this screen capture, I'm actually creating a custom web app and adding that to that. That creates an application that I can use in the App Store. I've named this one Customers, and then within that I can take that customer's information and add that to my site using the app model with the 2013. So using Access services to access that information, which that database is now stored in SQL, we are now rendering back the contents of that. Now I could have imported my Access 2007 database into my custom web app that I developed, or custom Access database, and then brought that information forward into what you can see on the left is my issues, customers, employees. And this is the out-of-the-box UI for the Access services. So I can, again, if you've ever used a form within Access, this looks eerily familiar, and I'm able to toggle through and add new information. The key point is that I can now distribute this across the organization. For those that have tried to distribute Access databases across the enterprise using the security or the MDF file, you would recognize how challenging it was to get security appropriately in place here. Now, utilizing OAuth and the authentication model within SharePoint, we can now ensure that appropriate people are getting to this information and adding data. So the key points or the key takeaways on the Access services and why this is such a game changer in this in the new platform is that we are now able to import data from other sources, but bring that to an area where enterprise users can manipulate the data from their browser. So we don't have to pass the file around, we're getting off the static file structure. The Access data itself is now stored in SQL Server, where we can manage and scale the environment appropriately. We can increase our presence and scale up if we add more of these. A key point here for those that would attempt to do this is that Access Services does require SQL Server 2012. So your backend must be that. Also, because we're dealing with several databases, if this is going to be a situation which is widely utilized or widely advertised, it might make sense to create a separate SQL Server to host just the Access databases. In other words, please perform capacity planning when looking to institute this. For those that are running Office 365, the SQL databases are actually stored in the SQL Azure Cloud, so that again provides a little bit better scalability. So the last topic I'll cover is matter management and eDiscovery. This is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. I spent a lot of time focused in this particular business area. I think, and again, this is opinion, that in terms of key changes to the platform, this particular change or the changes that support this are the most targeted at one particular business problem. And when we look at things like drag and drop or productivity enhancements or workflows, these are platform-oriented changes that really can be applied in so many different ways. This particular requirement is very focused and targeted to what really those particular business owners need. So a couple misconceptions about eDiscovery. First, it's not about searching. What eDiscovery ultimately is about the preservation of content. It's about the control of content. It's about providing time containment around your content. And last but not least, it's very much about disposition, and especially in the public sector, in terms of how long you actually retain this information. So what we don't want to return or bring back in terms of our searching is more information than we need. We want to make sure we control that appropriately. Several key terms that I'll use throughout this, I want to make sure we baseline. First, a custodian. A custodian is actually not the author, but they are the owner of the content. And that term sometimes gets people caught up. A search term is an agreed upon query for content and agreed upon by both litigation parties. A lit hold or an in-place hold is a stipulation requiring that a company preserve all of the data that's in place. And so there's a few ways that have been instituted in 2013 that support that, but the idea is that once it's there, it can't go anywhere. That information must stay present. Those that are familiar with eDiscovery, what you're seeing on the screen is the electronic discovery reference model. And what this is a workflow process. This is a process that takes information from the larger enterprise and works its way to the presentation or as part of the production and preparation for presentation and ultimately litigation. So these several steps have been traditionally, many vendors have tried to group all of these steps into a particular product. My experience and the experience of the folks that work with me is that there are a myriad of products that support each one of these capabilities in varying degrees of excellence. And what you see on the screen is an interpretation or a potential scenario for supporting the full life cycle of eDiscovery. So on the left-hand side, we have some critical pieces of the puzzle, which are information management and identification. And I think, and again, personally, opinion-based, I think this is a key play area for SharePoint in terms of maintaining and identifying content and providing management of the overall content. As we move to the right, we get more into the forensic aspects of data control in terms of preservation and collection. But we can capitalize on the lit hold capabilities of SharePoint 2013. When we get further to the right of the model, we start talking about preparing all of the litigation and getting closer to preparation for handoff as part of the production. This is products like Clearwell or other high-end electronic discovery solutions. The key point to take away from this is that oftentimes products like that tend to charge by the byte. So the more information that you provide in terms of your scoping and culling of information, the more culling you perform and the more you refine your content, the more cost-effective your overall eDiscovery model is. So the emphasis that I'm presenting or proposing here is that by utilizing SharePoint, you can really reduce the amount of content that ultimately gets handed off during the last stages of this. So I'm going to go through a couple of screens of the new eDiscovery capabilities within SharePoint. In this particular example, I've created a eDiscovery center called Northeast Regional Discovery Center. This is a site collection that allows me to create new case sites for each one of my cases. And again, much to the wizard-driven processes, you see some good instructions in there and explanations of what each capability is. If you look to the right, you'll see the Create New Case icon there, which allows me to create a new case for my litigation. And this one I've quickly typed up copyright infringement, and that's a copyright case. And I'm using a template that is predefined for my site called an eDiscovery case, and I'm giving it a quick URL that I can get access to it. In this situation, it's NE_copyright_2013. We can also use this type of scenario for information requests or FOIAs. Once I've created the site for my copyright infringement, I can do two key things. First, I can create an eDiscovery set, and what an eDiscovery set is a query against the enterprise as well as Exchange, and allows me to apply a lit hold or an in-place hold of the content contained within that eDiscovery set. Then from my search and export, I can search against those eDiscovery sets and or the enterprise, save those searches, multiple queries, and then ultimately export that content out. And as I export that content out in this next slide, I can name the package. I can now dedupe my Exchange content. So for those that aren't familiar with eDiscovery, I would guess, well, let's just say by and large the content in eDiscovery is contained within PST files in Exchange. I can also include version control or several versions of my SharePoint documents, and I can include terms that are encrypted or in an unrecognized format. Once I've done that, I can save my export into a EDRM XML model, which is then compatible with other products, such as Clearwell or other tools. Here's my advanced search capabilities. I can provide Boolean searching, proximity searching, several other types of searches against the eDiscovery product set. And again, I can eliminate and dedupe my Exchange information. I configure, within my searches themselves, I can configure sources against datasets, or I can search against SharePoint, or more importantly, I can now save my searches against Exchange. Here's an example of adding new mailboxes or PSTs and adding new URLs to document libraries. Collectively, in the key takeaway on the eDiscovery, again, this is a very focused solution. In this slide, what we're trying to pinpoint or draw out is that each one of the steps on the left-hand side is seamless to the users. They're able to continue their business processes while the litigation support teams are able to lock down content, provide lit holds, perform enterprise-wide queries against the systems, save that information, export that into the EDRM XML, and get that content out for consumption by other applications. Again, the advanced search capabilities allow for fuzzy or phonetic-based searching, Boolean searching, and allow me to create new case sites so that I can lock down the permissions for that. I can save those searches, provide the in-place holds. I can access information across the enterprise now, whereas previously within in other litigation support scenarios, the teams are often geographically isolated, and being able to perform that type of searching can be extremely important. I can provide analytics on the performance of the team. I can gather more content, and I can export responsive materials. So when I've identified those materials that are within there, I can get and quickly access and pull that information out. So that is the key benefits of the new platform, or at least those key game changers. Thank you very much for your time. Look forward to meeting and talking with each of you in the future. If you would like to follow me, I'm on the AIS blogs. That's appliedis.com.